lot of the times we're afraid to be wrong about pretty much anything. And I see this trend happen in software development where there's almost like a fear that you can never be wrong, or like there's like wrong questions to ask or anything like that. Not only that doesn't really represent like how we learn as people, because it I think what tends to happen is that when somebody becomes very good at something, they forget what it's like to start out learning. And then when somebody asks like a fundamental question, they don't know how to respond appropriately. And where that what that leads to is discouragement on the part of the person who's trying to learn, and then no true training ever happens. Right. If we talk about, there's how many books written about like leadership and management and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to remembering what it was like to start out. And if you're a developer, there's no room for elitism. There's no room for thinking that you're a better developer than somebody else, because what's the point in that mentality? Does that help anybody? Or does that just, boost your own ego and hurt the collective feeling of the group? I think it's probably that. And if you're somebody starting out, right, it's hard enough. And you don't need somebody like giving you a hard time because you don't know something, right? Because let's face it, you can learn on the job, and you can learn a lot just by sitting down with somebody and going over fundamental things, and just watching somebody work. You can learn a lot by doing that. But the problem is that it seems like that is, for whatever reason, it seems like that is a lost art, right? The apprenticeship model we've talked about in this channel, for whatever reason, is not as common as I think it should be in software development. Now, I'm not saying that we should always sit down and pair program, but what I'm suggesting is that there needs to be a more open-minded approach to how we teach and how we learn software development. And you go on so many forums and threads, and people just either downvote or just say like, Google it or something. But that's circular, because they did Google it, and here they are asking. And so if anyone asks that kind of question on my channel, I'm just gonna either ban them or remove the comment, because there's just no place for that mentality, I think, when you're trying to learn software development. I mean, if you go back and look at my videos, you could probably pick out 100 things I've said that have been wrong about C sharp, right? But that's not the point of my channel. I never said that I'm a how-to channel. My channel is literally just working through code, whether it's wrong or whether it's right. It's about learning. And learning fundamentally is not knowing everything at the beginning and then just like saying that you always knew. That doesn't help anybody, but that's what happens. Elitist attitudes are very common, unfortunately, in software development. And I think it's getting better. But what I fear is happening is that it's becoming too normalized, and people are normalizing that sort of interaction with people that they're trying to learn from. And I don't think it's a good thing. I genuinely think that, when you're trying to learn something, whatever it is, sometimes you don't ask somebody a question because you're trying to just have them explain it to you. Sometimes just by asking a question out loud to somebody else and having a dialogue back and forth about it is helpful for you to learn, regardless of how much you're actually learning from them. Sometimes it's easy just talking about it. And that's what I found to be true on YouTube, right? When I'm sitting here, just blabbering on about some nonsense or some software development thing, it's helping me process what I'm learning. It's helping me understand what I'm reading and work through, different coding examples, and, experiment with things. And my one of my big hangups is that this trend of learning becoming like this, uh, this like acceptance of an elitist attitude, I think hinders creativity and just free thought. Because a lot of times when you're learning something, you'll have the most creative questions that you'll have right when you're just starting out learning it because you're thinking about it differently. Somebody who's been doing something for many decades probably does not have the same questions as somebody first starting out. And so when you're first starting out, you should be open to ask any kind of question that you have because sometimes you think about things differently and that's a real positive. And that kind of energy I think is very impactful in the software development, group community because it gets people thinking differently, right? Anytime you can think differently, anytime you can approach a problem in a different way, I think that that's where the true power of this career comes into play because there are so many ways to do things, but there's still a lot that has been left on the table to be had, right? There's new ways that we haven't discovered to do things, and all it takes is the right question and thinking about it differently to arrive at that solution, right? When you read papers, research papers, books, whatever it is, those answers they just like people didn't pull them out of just thin air. They had to think about them. They had to practice and propose solutions and experiment and put money towards researching and get the research peer reviewed and go through a process, right? It's not just somebody writes one draft on a paper and it's immediately accepted. That's not how learning happens. But for whatever reason, people take that approach when they teach software development, thinking that they're better than other people. It's very backwards, and I wish we took a more research and peer review type process when we're learning this field in a professional environment. Because let's face it, nobody's an expert at everything. Some people are very good at particular topics, and some people truly are experts at a small number of things. But nobody understands everything in software development. You're just not going to happen. There's just too much to learn. And so by coming in, I think, with an open mind and trying to learn as much as you can, but promoting that type of environment of asking questions and learning, that's only going to help everybody because it's going to boost morale. It's going to boost everybody's attitude. And let's face it, if you ask a question and then it immediately gets shot down, how are you going to feel? What's your attitude going to be like? Are you going to be, what incentive is there to ask another creative question if you get that same response, right? Your learning is going to plummet. But if you ask a question, you're just thinking and you're just thinking about an idea, just a creative question, and somebody approaches it with an open mind to say, I've never thought about it like that. Why don't we test and see? And if it's wrong, it doesn't matter because you still learn something. And that's what this career is all about, experimentation. And if we go back to videos where I talk about agile, that's why I think it's so important to have research and prototyping in the early stages because it promotes that kind of culture. It promotes that kind of thinking of like, being open-minded about new and different ways of thinking about something, not just sticking to the same thing that's been done for however many years because, that's just the way it is. And, that's how I've always been doing it. So that mentality is very difficult to overcome and you're going to inevitably come across it in your career. And especially if you're younger getting into this career, you're probably going to be working with people more experienced and older than you. So you may come across this mentality, but just try to be positive and try to approach it with an open mind yourself to be like, okay, where are they coming from and how do I just kind of fit into this environment? And that's what I really had to, that was one thing I struggled with in the beginning was that, when I had just started, right, this job, I didn't have any, experience like everybody else did when they started out. But I had difficulty adjusting to that, and I generally wish that there was more like open-minded conversations and just talking about ideas and going back and forth, problem solving, right? Because we see like, TV shows or movies where they're like solving a problem collectively, talking about, throwing ideas out there. That all looks great on film or video, but finding that in the real world, is difficult. So if you can make that kind of culture where you work, that's going to be a really good thing. And that's going to be the thing that I think attracts people that you're going to want to work with. Um, let's face it, because work is difficult, and a lot of days you don't want to work. And so it's easier to show up to a place that you want to work rather than show up to a place that you don't want to be there because your ideas consistently get shot down. So be thinking of that. And it's something I'm always thinking of. I'm always trying to think of like ways to be more positive and ways to honestly just promote like just more open discussion about software development ideas. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.